Hello everyone, welcome and thanks for joining. Today we're going to talk to you a little bit about Cybersecurity Operations Centre, and we're joined by our partner Chorus, and hopefully we'll give you some useful information. And if you do have any questions or anything throughout the session, please use the feature in chat and we will answer them as we can. So today, for those of you that don't know, I'm Mark Mitchell. I'm the CTO for CWSI. We've been working with customers for a very long time around endpoint security and cloud security more recently. And with that, I'd like to introduce Callum.
Thanks, Mark. Hey guys. Yeah, so I'm Callum. I'm a cybersecurity consultant for Chorus. So I should be able to help with any technical questions surrounding onboarding, and we work with anything Microsoft, really.
Brilliant. Thanks, Callum. So just to give you a bit of an overview for those that don't know, so CWSI have been around for over 10 years now. We were founded in Dublin in 2011. We're now present in over 5 European countries, and we have a global customer base specialising in managing and securing hybrid work. And our purpose really is to enable the world to work securely from anywhere, any application, any device, any network. And I think we've demonstrated this with a lot of our customers over the last few years, by virtue of the fact that we've won Security Partner of the Year with Microsoft 2 out of the last 3 years. And we've kind of specialized in the Microsoft stack, helping organizations that are migrating from on-premise to cloud services and solutions. So to kick off today, I'd just like to kick off a quick poll just to kind of get a view from you guys about kind of what your view around security operations looks like. So you should see it pop up now. And if you want to select, that'd be great. Okay. And Callum, what was the results of that?
I can't actually see the results of that, Mark. They haven't popped up for me, sorry.
Okay. Well, we'll get back to those shortly. I'm sure Clara will come back with the results of the poll. And with that, I will hand over to Callum.
Thanks, Mark. So I'll start with setting the scene then on what we've seen recently. I think with the pandemic that happened recently, there has been quite a big shift in cloud consumption. More and more businesses are working remotely, and a lot still today are working in a hybrid model. And so the shift in cloud consumption is continuing to increase. And Microsoft Azure's own consumption went up about 1,000% in the first year of the pandemic. And so Microsoft are seeing that security concern as the cloud is increasing. And Microsoft have invested around 1 billion over the last 5 years in security, and they have announced another 20 billion over the next 5 years, which really goes to show how serious that they're taking their security. I think Microsoft really are seeing security as one of their main focus at the moment, as it did generate over $10 billion alone, and it is growing 40% year on year. And we are really seeing this innovation that Microsoft are bringing to their security tooling, as they're constantly bringing in new preview features. They're constantly trying to adapt their current tooling, and it can be a little difficult to keep up, even for myself. Although with the speed that cybercrime is increasing and the way that the line keeps getting further and further, it's really good to see that Microsoft are keeping up with that speed the best that they can. And another thing to mention is how Microsoft are pushing their governance at the moment. So in terms of regulation and compliance, if we look at data labeling, you're able now to label files, documents, emails, label them as internal, confidential, and it's really trying to help with that accidental data leakage, which a lot of businesses are trying to reduce the best they can. Another side of that is Defend for Cloud. So that is the multi-cloud tool that Microsoft have available for any servers that are in the cloud. We're able to bring in on-premise servers into that as well as any virtual machines that you may have in Azure, for example. All of that will be controlled in Defend for Cloud. And in terms of compliance, they are now making it easier than ever to manage all the different controls with the industry standard framework such as NIST, ISO, CIS. You're able to see exactly what VMs are failing each control, as well as giving manual steps to fixing each control, as well as there being some quick fix auto remediation that Microsoft are pushing in. And again, they're trying to make those more and more as they can. So you are able to auto fix a lot of these controls as well to kind of keep up to date with the frameworks the best you can. So looking at some of the key statistics that we've seen recently, first one to share is over the last 12 months in terms of attacks and breaches, there have been 59% of medium businesses and 69% of large businesses that have experienced attacks over the last 12 months. So that number might be a little bit higher than people might expect. And in terms of how many days on average it takes to detect a breach, it's almost half a year. I think it's worth mentioning that if you don't have any tools in place to actively try and monitor for breaches, if you're not actively looking for any suspicious activity in your network or in your infrastructure, and if an attacker doesn't make any mistakes, it's very difficult to find them. And so I think it is very important to have something in place to be monitoring on the lookout for any suspicious activity. As on average, if a breach is contained within 30 days, companies are saving almost $750,000. And I think it's worth mentioning that you could just imagine how much more money is saved if you can lower that number from 30 days to single digits, even hours. You can save a lot more money that way. And on the Gartner report, which has put Microsoft as leaders in the security, a lot of security points, they're estimating that around 50% of organizations will be using MDR by 2025. So in about 2 years' time, half organizations should be using MDR, according to them. But again, that's only half of businesses when you think about it, and over half of businesses where medium and large are concerned are getting attacked. So I think we need to push that number up as high as we can. Then looking at the growing threat of cybercrime, I think it's worth taking a moment here to look at the different kinds of options available that people can buy and how much they're actually going for. And so the cost of cybercrime by 2025 is estimated to be around $10.5 trillion annually. It's a very high amount, 10.5 trillion annually per year. And to mention a few attacks which we've seen recently, especially in the UK, we've seen the BBC be attacked, British Airways, Boots, Royal Mail, WH Smith, Ofcom, even Manchester University has been attacked recently. And half of those attacks came from the same vulnerability, actually. And so cybercrime is a threat, and they are targeting all sectors of infrastructure. It ranges from healthcare and public health to IT companies can still be attacked, and some of the bigger ones are financial services, of course, and energy sectors. They have quite a lot of data held, and so they are kind of high up as well in the target range. And in terms of ransomware attacks, we are seeing that they are being increasingly more successful. They are crippling businesses, it is happening, and the profits from these attacks are continuing to rise. That's the exact reason why cybercrime is continuing to rise. They are being successful. And what we're looking at on the page here is the cybercrime supply chain. And so it is continuing to mature. It is allowing almost anyone to purchase the services needed to conduct whatever malicious activity that they have in mind. And with the increased demand for these services, threat actors are increasing their automation for these toolings. So when it comes to spear phishing, for example, or ransomware kits being sold, trying to get stolen username and password, trying to break into people's accounts, they're driving automation with all of this. And as we're seeing the increase with AI especially, automation is going to be more prevalent than ever. And so they're increasing their scale while also lowering the cost. And that's why you're seeing some of these services be sold what seems like so cheaply. But it is not hopeless. I hope I'm not scaring people too much. There are two positive trends that we have seen recently. First, more governments and companies are coming forward when they are victims. And so this transparency is helping in several ways. It has made clear to governments around the world that cybercrime is a threat to security, and it is drawing attention to the problem and allowing increased engagement. That's only a positive. And secondly, now that governments around the world are recognizing that cybercrime is a threat, they have made combating it a priority. And so governments around the world are passing new laws. This is regarding reporting. They are creating cross-government task forces. They are allocating resources to this now, and they are seeking private sector assistance. So it is important to remember that not all attacks do work. We are trying to stop them the best we can, but it is critical that we keep improving our defenses to increase the failure rate of attacks and the associated cost of attackers. So we have to keep up to date with them the best we can. And so a question on why Microsoft security. Here at COSC, we do push Microsoft security. That is something that we try and adapt the best we can. And we try and consider ourselves Microsoft experts in that field. And so one of the main reasons is that Microsoft does serve billions of customers globally. They process over 43 trillion signals of security context per day. And so with this massive pool of data, this all feeds into their machine learning, their automation, and all that is forming ongoing patches, general threat information. It's improving their security products. And this is why they're able to move at such a fast speed and why they are pledging 20 billion over the next 5 years, is that they're getting all this security data in. They're able to do a lot with it. Another key feature is Microsoft's combined signaling. So this is another key standout. The power of their toolset when it's integrated with the wider security stack is leagues ahead of any competitor at the moment. They do have various different licenses, which can be difficult to get your head around. They have various different tool sets available, and they're all able to communicate with each other near real time. If I'm to bring up an example of this, if Defender for Office thought that a malicious attachment was safe, so it ran safe attachments or safe links with emails, and it came to the conclusion that a specific attachment was safe. It then allowed a user to download it. Defender for Endpoint, which is the EDR solution on the systems, will then pick it up and run through it anyway. So it'll run through its own engine, and they're almost checking each other's homework, essentially. And so Microsoft are taking on this assume breach philosophy, which we try and push across as well. And what it means is you have to assume that an attacker will get through at some point. So it's not good enough these days to just build up your fences and, okay, no one's ever going to get through. We have to think of the next step. If someone does get through, assume that's going to happen, how we then protecting the rest of the infrastructure and the rest of our clients' networks. And so we're protecting all along the cyber kill chain. And what we're really doing is creating what's called defense in depth. And so we're creating these many loopholes that an attacker has to get through. We're monitoring various different areas that they would likely be attacking or laterally moving to, and trying to capture them all along that cyber kill chain. And finally, something to mention is sometimes we have seen with certain clients is that you are able to remove third-party costs by moving to Microsoft. We have had a few clients which we found are using something like Business Premium, M365 Business Premium, which does come with a lot of Microsoft security tooling available. And so we found that they were paying for 2 EDR solutions, or they're paying for 2 emails or 2 antiviruses, etc. And they didn't realize it. And so I think it's worth going and taking a look at what Microsoft licenses you do have and checking what security toolings you do have available. We're always available to chat about that as well. And now we'll talk a little bit about our managed service, of course. Before I get into this, I think it's worth mentioning, just to keep in mind when I talk about this, is that what we're offering here isn't just installing Microsoft tools on your devices and helping you with governance and compliance and all this kind of stuff, which we do provide, but that's not the only thing that we do. When I talk about this managed security that we're offering, it's having that trained analysts and engineers behind the screen 24/7, 365 days, so they don't take a day off. And that is someone constantly checking these alerts. So we're not just putting software on your device, which you might already have on some of your devices, and it might scream out alerts some days, and then you have to look through it yourselves. That's not what we're offering. We're offering analysts to be able to investigate these alerts on your behalf, taking that pressure off our clients, and then we'll contact yourselves as we have a conclusion, after we've contained the device, or if we need a bit more information. And so if we are to look at our services provided, there are 3 offerings that are underpinned by Microsoft technology. And really the core differences here is just scope of coverage. And so if I start on the left side with MDR endpoints, this is our entry level. Again, it doesn't change what the analysts do. So they still perform the same action. They're still going to manage you the best of their ability. It's just that with MDR for endpoints, it's just protecting endpoints only. So it's only leveraging the EDR solution, which is Defender for Endpoint. And that's kind of it. Everything's still going to get put into Sentinel. We're still going to be giving you investigations and reporting, etc. And so looking at the last 2, it's our managed extended detection and response services, so MXDR. So it's more that extended protection. So it's leveraging more of the security stack. So this is mostly for E5 customers. So E5 produces kind of all the Microsoft security tooling. If you are someone that has business premium, you could purchase an add-on, say Cloud Apps, that could then be considered for advanced. And so it just makes further use of the automation that we've built up and AI that we are using. And so we do push automation there the best we can. And it's just going to take more use of that as you have more tools available for us to use, essentially. And so MXDR Advanced, this is increasing coverage to cloud services, identity services, whereas MXDR Premium does the same thing as Advanced, except it's able to ingest third-party tooling. So if you are a business which has firewalls in place, Meraki, things such as that, we're able to pull in those logs as well. And then our engineers are going to work hard to, if we haven't already pulled those in before, our engineers will create new rules surrounding that, new automation surrounding that. And so this is our way of trying to bring in all these third-party tools that we can. And lastly, just to mention that we do understand that data sovereignty is a great concern to everyone. And so you can take peace knowing that we don't hold any of your data ourselves. We don't have a database where we're storing all our clients' logs and all your customer data. Nothing like that happens. We utilize something called Azure Lighthouse. And so this gives us almost like a window pane glass view into your tenant. And so when we're setting up all these different toolings and Microsoft Sentinel, which is our SIM solution to view all these events, we're setting these up in our client's own environment. We are just getting access to that. So we're delegating least privilege access to our analysts that do need it, so they can take a look in and investigate those threats.
Brilliant. Thanks, Callum. Yeah, we've just got a couple of questions coming through, but I'd just like to remind everyone you can ask questions in the chat box. Callum, how long does it take to implement a SOC with a medium-sized business as an average?
Yeah, so it does vary based on the service selected. MDR endpoint is going to be a lot quicker. So the longest that it can take, which is an MXDR Premium, is it can take 2 months. So it can take up to 2 months if you have firewalls that you want to bring in, everything else as well. That's kind of the longest. The shortest that we can do is 2 weeks. So if there's quite a quick turnaround, you might already have some of these toolings already installed and already onboarded, then that's a very quick turnaround for us, as you already have the tools ready. If you don't have anything set up, that's totally fine. It would just take a few more weeks for us to be able to roll out all these security toolings as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Callum. Yeah, so the results from the first poll around what level of knowledge do people have around SOC. So the average was 67% of people that said 3 on average.
Okay.
So kind of people have some knowledge, and it's good that those results are so high, I think.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good to see.
Brilliant. Right, so for our second poll, So just getting the results coming in. All right, so it seems to be pretty much an even spread between cost, resource, and time, which I think pretty much sums up most IT issues.
Yeah, that is what we see a lot of. That is what we see a lot of. I think that those are also tend to be the people that we are able to help, as when it comes to, as you mentioned, with the resources, time. Most businesses just don't have enough people internally to be able to deal with the amount of alerts that are popping up. And I think that's one thing that we're offering with our service is, as I mentioned, we're not just going to be installing the tooling so that you see all these alerts and you have to deal with it yourselves. We're actually taking that resource and time burden off your hands. So we're having our own analysts investigate all these alerts, so you can really take a very much hands-off approach. It kind of varies with different clients that we had. You do have some clients who like to get a bit more stuck in, which is great. We allow that. And then you do get, on the other hand as well, which majority of people are, where they just don't have the resources and time to be able to get as stuck in as they'd like. And so we're able to take that off your hands, and then we're offering you monthly reports to keep you up to date with what's going on in the business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what is really positive is knowledge is really low. Only 8% say knowledge is a barrier, which I think is really positive because it shows that the awareness does exist out there.
Yeah, that's good to see.
Brilliant. Thanks, Colin. So,
cheers.
I suppose really to kind of get in there is so why do you need a SOC? And I think this is probably going to be a bit superfluous given that knowledge from that last stat there, but hopefully there might be a few interesting points for you. So first and foremost is to detect the threats that you might not be aware of. And again, as Callum kind of covered here, that a lot of these attacks go unnoticed for a period of time. And the longer that they go unnoticed, the more harm and damage that can be done. A longer mean time to detect a breach means more opportunity for those cyber criminals to steal data, to extend their reach across the network, or achieve some form of persistence and escalation. That's why you shouldn't just try to shorten the time to detect the breach, but also to the time to recover as well. So back to those stats from Callum earlier, that the sooner you find it, the bigger saving that you're likely to see from the cost of that breach. So the mean time to recovery is typically defined as the period between detection and when the attack has been neutralized and any of the affected systems are fully restored. So your organization may have different notions of acceptable MTTRs depending on your industry, but the data you manage, but optimally recovery should happen in a matter of hours at most. So having those processes in place, having the ability to recover, offsite backups, all the usual kind of things really are kind of imperative. But also it's about being able to respond faster to these incidents. You know, these cybercrimes are evolving. The tools, the tactics, the procedures, like you say, a lot of these things are for sale. They're being generated by groups and made available to anyone and everyone that can, buy them. And we've seen that some of these tools are for sale for really peanuts, like hundreds of pounds. And that just means that the tools are in the hands of everyone. And we all know about script kiddies and all those kind of things in the past, but because this has now become such a big focus and cybercrime is really adopting it, it's just shown the extent and the growth is exponential. So professional cyber criminal groups, nation state actors, and groups that really try and focus and leverage zero-day exploits, they're exploiting vulnerabilities that haven't been patched by the software vendors yet. So because that they can be so quick to leverage some of these attacks, but we're at the mercy of the vendors being able to release the patches, having the ability to identify, to spot, to monitor, and to respond to these attacks is absolutely essential. They only need seconds, but for in some cases it could be months to wait for those patches to come out. And we saw that with, over the last few years where, they're exploiting things like VPNs and things like that because it's a way of getting into the network, it's getting past the traditional security and get to those environments. But then as we move more and more to cloud services, the cloud services themselves, by their very nature, are more accessible. So by compromising an individual means you get to compromise a whole platform potentially. So speed is the key. The next really is to understand how it happened. So using threat intelligence data, both from the industry and the ecosystem about how other organizations have been breached, but also by having that visibility of your own infrastructure to understand how that attack happened, how quickly it happened, and what you could do to kind of protect against it. I mean, the assumption is a data breach is caused by an outside hacker, but that's not always true. That that could be an accidental insider, someone that saw something that they shouldn't have seen, whether they were just using someone else's computer or something was accidentally shared. It could be a malicious insider, because again, insider risk is also growing in the events that are happening out there. That they're deliberately sharing data, and again, that could be deliberate in a malicious content, but it could be, just the fact that they decided to share data to their home PC so they could carry on working on it outside hours or things like that. But it also means that this data is now where you don't want it to be. It could be from lost or stolen devices, and it could be primarily from malicious outside criminals, that are here to try and breach this data. And some popular methods used tend to be things like phishing attacks, and we see that because I think there was a stat that business email compromise accounted for something like 80% of hacking attempts or industry breaches. So by understanding that, developing processes and being able to monitor it is obviously essential to prevent that from happening again. And then the fourth one, it's around expertise. And we all know, we've all seen the reports and things like that. And again, an example from a recent report by the UK government, demand for cybersecurity professionals has increased significantly in 2022, a year-on-year increase, which has led to a shortage of skills in the market. And we're seeing that because being able to find people with the skills, being able to afford people with the skills, because the costs are spiraling. So to be able to have those people to get the expertise is essential, and it is challenging. And there's early stage indications that the cybersecurity is increasingly taking on entry-level staff, which again, lack of experience is a risk in itself. And it's then also costly to train those staff and to get them the experience that they need. But it's not something we can sidestep or kind of put our heads in the sand for. Also a lack of complementary skills among job applicants is becoming a bigger issue for the cybersecurity business. Again, as we IT becomes more and more siloed in its areas, you're not gaining that same level of expertise that you would normally build as you kind of went through your career. So businesses are finding themselves lacking incident management skills. So outside the cybersecurity sector and across the wider economy, technical cyber skills gaps have remained relatively constant. Half of all firms in this report cited a lack of basic skills, and a third have more advanced skills gaps. So, for example, in things like penetration testing, forensic analysis, and security architecture. These are common issues that we're seeing across the board, and we know ourselves trying to recruit people with these skills is difficult. But it is kind of essential more and more, and that's why, as Callum mentioned, that governments are putting a lot more effort now into creating training programs, funding available in the right places, and being able to kind of fill that skills gap. But I don't think it's something that's going to happen in the short term. But again, it's a challenge that we're all seeing, and again, kind of goes back to that thing from the, what are the challenges is cost. Because the cost of recruiting people, especially when you're looking at a CSOC where you were looking for 24/7/365, having those skills available, requires big teams to do that. But ultimately, the knowledge and expertise around the products and services within your environment So to be able to do the investigation and analysis is key. So it really does require some investment there. So with that, I'd like to, again, anybody got any questions or anything that they'd like to ask, either Callum or myself? Like I say, please add to the chat window. Another one that's come through is, what happens if we implement a SOC and we find a lot of errors or risks within our environment? Would this come at a greater cost? What would be your view, Callum?
Right. So we have had this happen in the past. Of course, we have taken on a new client, onboarded them. I think it's important to mention with our onboarding process, we do perform a threat assessment initially. And so if there were any gaps or major threats or major vulnerabilities that were found, we would be bringing them up prior to onboarding any new clients. And so onboarding would be at a halt if there was a major incident. We would be available to advise and help a new client to resolve that threat. And so there's a potential for additional costs if they would require, say, an incident response type help, type service with that. Although if it's just your sort of typical advice that we can give with certain incidents that we find, then that would just be a part of the threat assessment reporting that we perform.
Brilliant. Thanks, Callum. Another question there is around service cost per incident. So we all know about ransomware costs and what that might look like. But what happens if you know, during the service that you find an incident? Does that add to the cost of the service?
No, not at all. You're paying for the service as a whole. So you are paying for us to be there for that exact incident to appear. So if there were ransomware that appeared, that's just part of the service that we're going to provide, with helping to contain it, to isolate it, give you some advice on that. There is an additional service that you could look into, which would be incident response in that aspect to ransomware that has appeared. That would be the only thing that would require additional service. Everything else, in terms of investigating the threat, analyzing the threat, containing it, etc., that's just part of the service.
Brilliant, thank you. Another one is here around ransomware.
Okay.
So is it inevitable that businesses will have to pay ransomware, or is it something that, you know, is something you can protect against?
That's a tricky question to answer. It's a good one, though. I think we do, as I mentioned previously, we do take that assume breach philosophy. So we like to, in the security industry, think, okay, it is inevitable, but that's mostly for us to be prepared for when it does happen and to prevent it from happening. There's always the chance that it can happen. Even bigger companies like WH Smith and Royal Mail, who you'd think has very good security, they've still been breached. And some of the ones I mentioned earlier, there's been around 8 recently in the UK, which have all come under the same vulnerability. And so one could argue that there was a chance for them to prevent that, but perhaps lack of speed, lack of research, it became inevitable that they were going to get compromised at that point. I think you got to prepare the best that you can, and so getting the best security tools that you can, especially in terms of Microsoft with their E5 stack, for example, it becomes increasingly difficult to be compromised at that point. I think if you're on top of vulnerability management, there's another key one to point out. If you have no vulnerabilities, if you have no weak fences in the link, it gets even more increasingly difficult to actually become compromised.
Brilliant, thank you. Another one is endpoint protection with Microsoft Defender sufficient, or are third-party products also recommended?
So for our service, a prerequisite is Defender for Endpoint EDR solution. So we do require that a Microsoft solution be used for the EDR solution. And of course, I would say that Microsoft is leagues ahead of the competitors, and something to back that up is if you look at the Gartner report recently, in terms of the EDR solution, Microsoft came out on top, and also for identity protection, I believe it was, and there might have been a third one for identity access management as well. The Microsoft were leaders in that division, and so if we go off that, Microsoft is definitely ahead of the competitors at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you. Is it likely to be written into standards, in your opinion, such as Cyber Essentials or NIST, to have 24/7 monitoring or an XDR solution in place?
Potentially. I think Cyber Essentials, it might not, as that tends to be the more entry level framework to get, but ISO in the future, it could definitely be something that they could think of, that you would need some form of monitoring service. I know in them at the moment, again, I'm not too clued up on compliance side, so please forgive me, but I'm pretty sure that they have some form of protection that is required in those frameworks as it is already. So there is a high chance that they could likely say, okay, you do need some form of analyst protecting or monitoring that client data. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And yeah, one last one. I think I suppose it's a very similar question, is that we've all seen the changes and the requirements coming through for cyber insurance. Costs are going up. The requirements to be able to even get insured these days are becoming more and more difficult. Does having a CSOC in place help with those kind of insurance requirements?
So speaking to the sales guys who know a bit more on that than I do, we have been speaking, and yes, it does. From what I've spoken to them about, and I've seen them speak to customers about, having a SOC in place, having all these security tools in place, that does help lower the insurance premiums. Yeah.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thanks for that, Callum.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you found that useful, and obviously you go away with a bit more knowledge than you had before, even though knowledge wasn't a major criteria or major issue for you guys. But thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate that. And if you do have any more questions or would like to talk in more detail with either myself, Callum, or the rest of the team, then yeah, please do reach out, and we'd be happy to talk to you.